It's 2005 in a flashy New York office, and a hedge fund manager named Michael Burry is staring at a stack of obscure mortgage bonds. Everyone else still sees greed and gold, but Burry sees sandcastle walls ready to wash away. Meanwhile, across town in the world, another few outsiders start piecing the puzzle together while the world hurtles blindly toward disaster. Why are these smartest guys so sure the housing market will implode, and why does no one else want to hear it? The biggest financial crash since the Great Depression is brewing, inside a secret machine no one fully understands. Let's dive into the dark corners of finance where the actual danger lives. These are the shadow markets, where bankers cook up twisted bets disguised as safe investments, far from any oversight. Michael Burry, a quirky neurologist turned hedge fund manager, was the first outsider to spot the rotten core of the housing market. He sifted through stacks of mortgage files, identifying risky loans made to people unable to pay back. Betting his fund against these so-called subprime mortgages, he bought credit default swaps, essentially insurance on loans destined to fail. Everyone else called him crazy, but Burry's fund ballooned as defaults surged. Behind Burry's bet were intricate securities called collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs. Imagine Russian nesting dolls where one bond contains hundreds of other bonds, some solid, some junk. This complexity was like a perfect disguise masking the real risk. To most investors, these CDOs looked safe, like AAA-rated gold bars, but under the surface, they were constructed from junk mortgages ready to implode. As defaults spiraled, a few others caught on, like Steve Eisman and Gregory Lippman. Their profits came not from building wealth, but from anticipating widespread ruin. Eisman later confessed it felt like shorting humanity itself. The financial world, paralyzed by greed and denial, failed to stop this ticking time bomb. When the collapse hit, it exposed not just faulty finance, but also deep flaws in human nature. Here's the twist: not everyone who understood the danger acted on it. The world's sharpest minds were paralyzed, caught between hope, fear, and a powerful self-deception. Despite the obvious warning signs, Wall Street bankers doubled down on risky bets. They were making massive profits selling these exotic products, and admitting a crash was imminent would crash their own bonuses. People like the executives at Goldman Sachs quietly bet against their own clients while selling toxic assets. It became a giant game of pretend, the greater fool theory in full swing. The SEC, supposed watchdog of the market, was essentially AWOL. Years of deregulation had turned the financial world into a free-for-all playground. The areas where these risky derivatives thrived, the shadow banking system, were opaque and too complicated even for regulators to penetrate. It was like trying to police a maze while blindfolded, letting greed spiral unchecked. Even savvy investors found themselves stuck. The market was a house of cards held up by hope, hope that the housing boom would continue, hope that prices wouldn't fall. This cognitive dissonance blinded many to the dark signs. Betting against the housing market meant looking like a fool if it kept rising. So most chose to look away, complicit in ignorance, until it was too late. When the credit bubble finally burst, the consequences rocked the world and taught brutal lessons about finance, humanity, and where real power hides. By late 2007 and into 2008, mortgage defaults exploded, banks collapsed or required huge bailouts. Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, the loudest crack in the system that had been too big to fail. Markets froze, credit vanished like dust in a desert wind. Stock values tanked, pensions and savings evaporated. The big shorters who bet against the market rode the storm to massive profits, but for most it was a nightmare. Behind all the numbers and securities were millions of Americans evicted from their homes, often victims of predatory lending disguised as opportunity. The doomsday machine wasn't just financial jargon, it was real people losing everything. The crisis exposed stark inequalities and the moral hazards baked into modern finance, where risk is privatized but loss is socialized. The remarkable insight: this isn't just about finance, but about human systems and blind spots. The machine only works when denial, complexity, and herd mentality team up. Reading Michael Lewis's tale shows you where to look for warning signs and reminds you that in finance, as in life, if something looks too complicated to understand, you're probably not alone. Try seeing through the noise. Ask the tough questions next time you hear safe investment. Remember Michael Burry staring at those flawed mortgage bonds? The story that started in that quiet office exploded into a global crisis. The Big Short wasn't just a bet, it was a mirror showing us how blindness to complexity and hope for the best can wreck worlds. So next time you face a sure thing, try this. Ask yourself, what's the risk no one is naming? That's where the truth often hides. Subscribe for more book summaries like this one.